What's up, guys? Thank you so much for all the support. Thank you for liking and subscribing to everything we're doing. Please just continue to do that. It really helps us get our message out. Today on the show, we have Chadd Wright. Chadd is a local guy who graduated from Paulding County High School and actually went to become a Navy SEAL after school. So he shares a lot about the adversity he had to overcome to become a Navy SEAL and shares some on his tours and everything. Really interesting stuff there. And then now that he's retired from the military, he's actually an ultra marathon runner. He just finished a 250-mile race. So he talks a lot about the mindset he has going into those races. And it was just really good information. I'm so glad that you guys are going to get to hear his story. And we just thank you so much for all the support. So without further ado, Chadd Wright. What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning in to the next episode. Today we've got Chadd Wright, and we're actually lucky to have his dad as well, James Wright. He's making an appearance for us here today. But we're so excited to dive in. Chadd has done a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna let him just kind of tell you his journey. But Chadd, thank you so much for coming, man.
I'm glad to be here. This is really cool to, this is pretty much the community that I grew up in, and you know, Hiram is where we used to run around, and went to Paulding County High School with you guys. So it's definitely a different dynamic getting to be here and have a conversation with you guys. We grew up in the same place, in the same way, in the same community. So I'm looking forward to it, man.
Man, we're so thankful to have you. It's so cool to have you as a local come back, and you know, most of our following is local, so it's going to be so cool for them to hear your story. So I guess just tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up here in this county.
Yeah, it was a lot. I guess it was a lot different back when we were kids. This area has changed a lot. It's exploded. It's crazy. This is probably the first time I've been back through Hiram specifically in 2 years. I mean, I don't come out this way anymore, so it's interesting to see it change. But when we were growing up out here, it was still pretty rural. I remember going to Paulding County High School. We had the muddiest truck of the year contest, and it was just a lot of culture, a lot of redneck culture, and
Rob knows a lot about that.
It was a great place to me it was a great place to grow up and to explore and learn how to be a boy and go out and hunt and fish and do things that kind of shaped the foundations of skills and things that would serve me well later on in my military career. You know, I was a breacher in the SEAL team, so I had to know how to use chainsaws and quickie saws and stuff like that as breaching tools. Well, that stuff just came naturally to me because of the nature of how we grew up, you know, working with our hands. And so I wouldn't have rather grown up in any other environment personally. And I guess the evidence of that is I left for a long time, and then I came right back pretty much to the same place that I started. So I have a lot of passion around our culture here in Northwest Georgia, the people, the community, and you kind of have to go further and further out to kind of get that now. But you know, it's weird growing up too. Like, I was an outdoorsman. You know, I liked being dirty and working with my hands and all that stuff, right? But I never really had any thought or inspiration of joining the military. I think that I never thought that I was really good enough to be a part of an organization that was like the U.S. military, that was held in that high regard. But I wasn't very good in school growing up, and I don't think it's because it's not because I was dumb. It's not that I couldn't understand the content. I inherited pretty good genes from my mother and father. My dad's a smart guy. Mom's a smart lady. So I had the intellectual ability to do well, but there was nothing about school that really challenged me, and I'm this weird type of person where I thrive in a challenge, or I thrive in chaos. And that, by the way, is probably one of my biggest strengths, but also one of my biggest weaknesses, because when you're like I am, even as a young kid, in a lot of ways, if there's not a crisis or chaos, you get bored, and then you almost end up creating one just so you're not bored anymore. But school, I didn't like it. Barely graduated high school. I remember the last day of high school. I think by that point, I was hard-headed. By that point, Mom and Dad had pretty much gave up on me. They were just like, dude, if you don't want to graduate high school, that's your problem. You're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. But I went around, I remember the last day of high school at Paulding County High School, I went around to my teachers, and I was failing the majority of my classes. And I went around and begged them to change my grades, because back then, you know, they had they could pull it up on their computer and they could just kind of edit. This might be illegal, by the way, because I know grades are legal documents, but I went around to these teachers. I remember one specific, I don't know if y'all remember this old dude named Mr. Moody.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
That dude, I remember going to him specifically because I kind of looked up to that guy. He was a cool teacher.
Yeah. Cool.
And I begged them to change my grades, and all of them were very graceful with me and went into the computer and changed my grades to just barely passing. So then I was able to actually graduate my senior year, which meant absolutely nothing to me other than the fact that I didn't have to go there anymore.
Yeah.
So
parents might gain some faith.
Yeah, no, not really. I was not a person who instilled confidence in people back then. So, you know, I didn't go to graduation. I remember, like, at some point my you know, high school diploma came in the mail, but I didn't give a crap, right? And I ended up, when I graduated high school, I was working on a farm for a little while for a local guy, and it was just a grind. So my first real job was with a company that was right here in Dallas. I don't know if they're even still in business, called B&B Concrete. I don't know if you guys remember those guys. We made like big culverts and crap. They poured them in these forms.
Right there by the sheriff's office.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so I'd go down and sit in this little booth all day and run this concrete mixer. And that was like my first real job where I actually had some level of accountability. But, you know, I just remember sitting down there day after day. And finally I had to like come to the reality that if I didn't do something, because I didn't want to go to college, which college I think people are finally starting to realize is a crock of bull crap anyways. Yeah. Like the universities and stuff are I think really starting to lose their credibility. But back then, that was the only thing to do, was to go to college. That's what everybody pushed if you wanted to be successful in life. I didn't want to do that. And I'm sitting down here running this dang concrete mixer, and for some reason I just came to terms with the fact that if I didn't do something different, like this was going to be my life for the rest of my life, right? And you know,
you were like 19 right then?
I was probably 18.
Wow.
Yeah, 18 years old. So I came to that realization probably within the span of about 6 months of doing this job for this concrete place. And well, when I kind of accepted the reality that I was either going to kind of be pigeonholed into this kind of labor type of hourly wage type of stuff, because I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. I didn't know anything about like starting a business. Like for me at that age was something that sounded impossible. Yeah. Like there's no way I was capable of starting my own business or brand. I didn't even know what any of that stuff was. And so I started then for the first time considering joining the military. Wow. And the first recruiter I talked to was I'm going to tell you a story to show you how dumb I was back then. The first recruiter I ever talked to was with the Marine Corps, because every redneck young man in North Georgia, when he thinks about the military, what does he think about?
Marine.
The Marines. Yeah. Every single one of us. That's what we view the military, like the pinnacle of the military is an infantry, Marine Corps soldier. They have the highest. Now the Marine Corps is a legit organization. They probably do have the highest standards out of all the branches. So I talked to this Marine Corps recruiter, and then over the course of my conversation with this guy, the second or third time we talked, I finally asked him, like, I was beginning to realize there were other jobs in the military other than carrying a rifle. And so I asked this guy, I'm like, well, what do you do in the Marine Corps? And he was like, I'm logistics. And I said, well, what is that? I didn't even know what logistics was. And he was like, I drive a truck. Well, I was like, I'm not joining an organization where I might get stuck as a truck driver.
Yeah.
Now that's ignorant of me because, like, this dude was driving trucks through potentially the streets of Fallujah in Iraq,
Which is pretty dangerous.
Which is pretty dangerous, right? But I'm sitting here as just this dumb, stupid kid. And I'm like, this guy's a truck driver. I'm not joining the Marine Corps. They might stick me driving a dang truck. So then that's when I kind of discovered special operations. And back then also, this would have been like late 2006, I guess. Back then, there wasn't a lot of information on special operations or specifically the SEAL teams like there is now. Yeah. There's been, over the course of the last, 15 years, there's been tons of books and movies and all this stuff, but back then there wasn't. But they were recruiting really heavily back then because the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was really going hard. They were losing a bunch of dudes. And so they actually advertised online. And I remember being in that little booth, mixing my concrete and surfing the internet, which I wasn't supposed to be doing. And like this ad banner, I don't know if y'all remember that, the old school dial-up internet, like these ad banners would pop up. Yeah. And so this thing popped up and it was like, Navy SEALs, the hardest military training in the world. And that was all funded by the Navy back then because they were wanting people to come and try this program. So when I saw that, I thought, well, and then I looked a little bit more into what I could find about the SEALs. It's a direct action unit. It's a combat MOS. You don't have to worry about getting stuck driving a truck as a SEAL. You're going to get the best training in the world. And then 2, it's touted as the hardest training in the military, period. Yeah. And something about that really stood out to me. And I think it goes back to that kind of trait that I have where I really thrive in a crisis or chaos. And all of SEAL training was one big crisis or chaos. And so
that's about as chaotic as it gets.
Yeah, it was wild, man. And we could talk about SEAL training in a little bit if you want to, but that drew me to the SEAL teams as an organization specifically. And I finally went and talked to a Navy recruiter, and back then they were giving SEAL contracts, but you had to pass a physical standards test. I was about 210 pounds back then, freaking doing steroids and lifting weights.
I remember that, yeah.
And I couldn't even, part of the physical standards test was a 1.5 mile run. And I think you had like 9.5 minutes to do that. I couldn't even pass the run to get my SEAL contract, which is funny because 3 weeks ago I just ran 250 miles.
Yeah, that's what is funny.
I couldn't pass a mile.
You're a little bit older than you were then too.
Well, yeah, and so I set my sights on getting this SEAL contract. I would go take this physical standards test, like, I don't know, Dad, what do you think? Every couple weeks, probably. Yeah. Well, every 2 weeks or something. I'd drive down to the aquatic center in Marietta. It's a swim, push up, pull up, sit up, run. I'd take it like every two weeks. I failed it for like 2 or 3 months straight.
Wow.
And just kept getting a little better. And finally went one day and passed the run one time.
Let's go.
And that was all I had to do to get that contract because they were so desperate for guys back then.
Wow.
Nowadays, it's way more competitive.
Yeah.
You have it's almost like a NFL draft now to
Wow.
even get a SEAL contract. But back then, it was like, okay, if you pass this thing one time, we'll give you a
We'll need
contract
you.
and we'll send you to the
that
Navy.
was the heat of the war. For the
Yeah.
most part.
05, 06, 07.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good to go. So that kind of launched me off on my journey in the military, and that's kind of the backstory of why I even considered joining the military. I mean, the military is not a big part of our family. It never really, at least my immediate family. My grandfather had polio, and going back, it was just, I mean, my family is just blue collar, hardworking, salt of the earth people, but the military was never a thing. So that's kind of the backstory of my thought process and what led me up to kind of taking that step, which ultimately changed the trajectory of my whole life.
What do you think it was that was pulling you to the military with not having that background and not even liking the discipline and stuff like that?
Yeah. I think it was the realization that I didn't have many other options. And I wasn't satisfied with that. I wasn't satisfied with that job at the concrete shop. You know what I mean?
It was like the challenge too. Like it challenged you. You thought, man, I want to see if I can do this.
Yeah, the hardest training.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a part of it, Rob. As a young man or as a young woman, when you're in your, even your early 20s, there's every one of us, if you have any drive or gumption whatsoever, there's a part of you that wants to prove something to yourself, even more than to others, And so, I think there was a small part of that was a desire for me to prove to myself that, man, you've sucked at pretty much everything in life. You sucked at school. There was a long period of time where I was a pretty sucky son. I was a sucky brother. I sucked at pretty much everything throughout, different seasons of my life. And there was never really anything about me that stood out or that I could be proud of. So maybe this was finally me maturing enough to desire to do something that I could be proud of, right? Make my parents proud, make my brothers proud.
I love that.
Make myself proud,
I love that.
I'm not big. Pride is a dangerous thing, but you should have something in your life that you can look back on and say, all right, that was special.
Yeah.
And I gave it my all, just like you did taking that test, man.
Yeah.
So how does that work? So you pass the test, are you immediately in the SEALs training?
No,
after that?
Well, you actually everybody that comes into the Navy has to go through Navy boot camp. It's just a formality before you actually go out to Coronado Island and begin basic underwater demolition SEAL training, which is the selection phase to become a SEAL. So in Navy boot camp, this whole journey for me was was such a struggle because it was so hard for me to pass that test, get the contract. I finally get the contract. I go to Navy boot camp. I make it all the way through boot camp. I make it through the final evolution, which is called battle stations. And then we're literally going to the ceremony we exchange our hat that says recruit we then get a hat that says Navy, because after battle stations, you officially become a sailor. And so we're going to this ceremony to change our hat out and officially become a part of the United States Navy. And they pulled me aside, and I had to go to the doctor's office there on base. They were like, hey, they found something on your physical. They need to talk to you about this. And so I go down to see this guy and this doctor, Navy doctor, and he proceeded to tell me that I have this pericardial cyst on my heart, which was a 7-centimeter cyst. And it was asymptomatic. So the Navy basically said, look, this is not ever going to cause you an issue. You've had it your whole life. Nobody even knew it was there until we did this chest x-ray and we saw it. And they were worried that if I made it through SEAL training, when I dove underwater, when you go underwater, breathing compressed air, it puts a lot of pressure. It changes the pressure in your chest cavity and stuff. There's a lot of science behind that. And they were worried that the pressure change would burst the cyst, but they didn't know for a fact that would happen, but they weren't going to allow me to take that risk. So they said, basically, you can go be in the regular Navy and like go on a ship and do that. Choose something that you're not going to have to dive underwater. Or this can be like a breach of contract, essentially, and we can out process you from the Navy. Well, I had like set my sights on becoming a SEAL. There was nothing else in the Navy that I wanted that appealed to me. And so I chose to just get out of the Navy. I asked them if they would do a surgery to remove the cyst, but it was a rare condition and it was asymptomatic, and they wouldn't perform the surgery to remove this asymptomatic cyst, just so that I could go to participate in a training pipeline that nobody makes it through anyway.
Yeah.
We're
not going to do the surgery and then you just not even make it through anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Because that was the most likely outcome would be I wasn't going to make it through training anyways, and I was just going to be back in the regular Navy. So I finally got out of the Navy, went back home. My dad probably remembers more about those days than I do. My mind is a strange thing. My mind blocks out a lot of really traumatic, like stressful times of my life. I don't know, like when I recount these things that happened 15 years ago, I'm recounting them as I remember them, which is not the complete picture.
Yeah.
But I know when I got back home, you left, and then you had this dream, and then it gets taken away from you. You're told, no, it's not an option anymore. And then it's like you go all the way backwards to the exact place you started from. And everybody, I don't know what anybody thought of me, but my perception of what people thought of me was, well, yeah, of course Chadd's back home.
Yeah.
Who, Chadd Wright? Like, for real, man, like he was never going to make it in the military, especially the SEAL teams. Like, there's just no way. And so, yeah, Chadd Wright's back home. And I was just really depressed and just was a really, really hard season of my life.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And so ultimately, with the help of my family and the help of the people around me that loved me, I was able to find a civilian surgeon that would remove the cyst from my heart in elective surgery. And so.
How long was that? Do you remember roughly how long you were back before you?
Do you remember, Dad?
6 months, 8
Yeah,
months.
probably.
Yeah.
Because I know I know from the time I got back home to the time I was back in the Navy was a year.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So I went and had this elective heart surgery, which was a really tough decision to make, especially as a kid. I mean, Dad took me to the hospital. Mom took me to the hospital that morning, and I'll never forget, it was early. It was probably like 4 a.m., Dad, and I'm having these, second thoughts about, man, do I really want to go and let them cut me open just so I can. And here's the thing, the Navy didn't tell me if you had this cyst removed, they didn't say you could come back in. They didn't say that. This was just a gamble, a total gamble that they would even accept me back in. And so I just remember asking Dad, like, man, do you really think we should go through with this? And he told me straight up, I'll never forget, that's one of the most impactful things my dad ever said to me. He just said, son, if you want to go back in the Navy, like, you don't really have any other choice. So we're going to do this or not. And so we rode on up to the hospital. Surgery was good. They removed the cyst. And then I started the process of submitting paperwork to the Navy, because at this point, now I've had surgery, heart surgery. The Navy is aware of a condition that I had previously. I had heart. So now I have to go through this whole process of getting a waiver and get the big Navy stamp of approval to even come back in the military, because they're pretty picky when it comes to the health things, you know.
Never happened before either.
No, and that was the first case the first case of a SEAL candidate with a pericardial cyst, because it's a rare condition.
Yeah.
So they had never seen it before, and this whole thing is you can literally Google Navy SEAL pericardial cyst, and it's in a medical journal written by Navy dive medical officers, and it's all written up in there. So I ended up getting the waiver and getting back in the Navy, and
What a cool
that was
story.
What did those people say when you came back? The same physical people, like when you went through all that?
yeah, it's crazy because it happened so fast. Like I say, less than a year. When I did come back in the Navy, it was the same dude that disqualified me. The same doctor was still there. And so I just remember like walking back into his office for the first time with my paperwork from the civilian surgeon. And he was like, "What? I remember you, obviously, but what are you doing back here?" And, I gave him my paperwork, and they didn't have to approve that paperwork. Like, they didn't have to let me back in. But I think they could really appreciate the sacrifice I made for what I did, because that guy, as a doctor, like, he understood better than anyone that this was asymptomatic, and that I took it upon myself to go through the process of having this thing removed solely for the purpose that I might get to go do the thing that I decided I wanted to go do.
For the chance.
Yeah.
Committed.
Honestly,
They knew you were committed, though.
They had to respect that determination. Like, the doctor's sitting there, you come back.
Yeah,
this dude
yeah.
was determined.
And I just think that's such a cool lesson for our audience to hear, of like believing in yourself. You know what I mean? Because, dude, if I was put in that situation, I don't think I would have had, especially at that age, the gumption to go back and say, first of all, I'm scared to death of surgery, but I'm going to go have this surgery on my heart with the chance that I can make it through the hardest. Is it like a 10% success rating, or it's probably less than that?
It fluctuates, but yeah, I mean, we started our buds class 278 with about 300 men. We graduated with about, I don't know, maybe 12.
So less
original.
Than 10%. So
yeah.
That is just believing in yourself. I don't even think you probably realized it at that age, the gumption that it took to go do that. But that's a lesson in itself.
It's like you gave yourself no other choices. Like, when we go to start a business or do an endeavor or do whatever, sometimes you let these other choices kind of wave you off, like going straight towards your goal. But you gave yourself no other choice.
You can't have a plan B.
There was no option, and that is another reason you succeeded.
Yeah. You can't have a plan B for sure, especially when you're looking at achieving something that is extremely difficult. I think the other big lesson in this, and it comes from my personal perspective, that you guys can't really see what was going on inside my heart.
Yeah.
But the other big lesson of that portion of my journey in life is I can truly say that if I would have had the opportunity to go straight to SEAL training that first time without having to go through the heart surgery, I don't think I would have made it through training. I think I would have quit. I really do. But because that happened, and because when you think you want something, you don't really know how bad you want it until it's taken away from you, and when that happens, depending on the type of person you are, I guess, it just like stokes this fire in you where you're like, okay, I want this now more than I could have ever imagined wanting it, because now it's not an option for me anymore. At least that's what they're telling me. So I think that's what got me through that training, was the fact that I had to go through this whole process of actually just to get on the start line.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus knew that, because it's interesting as I look back on my life now, and I don't want to go too far forward, but I'll just say this while we're at this point in the conversation. I look back on my life now, and the whole time I was in the SEAL teams, my whole military career, I'm not a hero. There's nothing like heroic. Like it was, my whole military career was all about forging me into the person that Christ ultimately designed me or created me to be, right? So I think, even though I wasn't serving Christ back then, he still knew me. He knew my life from the beginning to end. He knew what his plans for me were. And so that part of the process with the heart surgery, I think he knew that I wasn't ready to go through this. So he put me through that so that then I would make it through this and actually be able to become who he created me to be.
Yeah, it's like tribulation worketh patience.
Man, people hear me say this all the time, and I think they just think I'm trying to be motivational. People hear me. There's a clip on social media that just went viral where I say, whatever you're going through is forging you into the person who you are ultimately supposed to be. Like whatever you're going through, I don't care if it's a divorce, I don't care if it's a bankruptcy, a failed business, sickness, whatever you're going through, if you will just keep going and you don't quit, if you will just keep moving through it, it's actually shaping you. It's designed, and it's shaping you into the person who you're ultimately going to become. And I think people think I just say that to be motivational, but like, no, that's the story of my life.
You lived it.
Yeah, it's the story of my life.
Those burdens can be blessings, you know?
Yeah.
And those tribulations you go through, like the Bible says, it worketh your patience, and then let it have its perfect work to become, because I love what you said, even I wasn't serving Christ then. He knew exactly about the 3 of 7 project. He knew about all the future endeavors that you were going to do before you were even on his team. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
he knew that he was going to use you as a tool, and how powerful the story is now as you can look back on it.
Yeah.
How does the SEAL training? I know you said we talk about that a little bit, because you basically have the heart surgery. Now you got to go do what you signed up to do. How hard was that? Because we've seen the movies, but I just couldn't even imagine.
Yeah. So you know how a lot of things in life, you have an expectation for it, and you build it up in your mind to be this like super challenging, super fulfilling, super awesome thing. You're a car guy. It's even like buying a new car, right? You get all excited about it, you build it up in your mind, and then you go get that truck that you wanted, and then you drive it for a few weeks, and it's like, this ain't that great. I'm ready to get rid of it and get something else, right?
Yep.
Well, SEAL training wasn't that way. SEAL training was like one of the very few things in life that I had built up to be this monstrosity in my mind, and ultimately the totality of it exceeded what I thought it was going to be. Wow. Yeah, and what I could get out of it, how hard it was, it definitely exceeded anything I could have ever imagined. So you start out with pre-buds. You're basically working out every day for 2 months with collegiate and Olympic coaches, and they teach you how to swim, they teach you how to lift weights, they get you really solid, really strong, and then you go out to Coronado and you start buds. Buds is 3 phases. First phase is kind of the big selection phase where most people quit. And I did really well in pre-buds. I actually got voted honor man of my class there, hard charger award. Again, I had been through the heart surgery. I was super motivated to be there. I got out to buds, and first phase was brutal. I mean, it was harder than, I'll tell you how hard it is. This is the honest to God truth. You are walking the line like to the point that some guys go over the edge and die. Guys regularly, I say regularly, usually every couple of years, somebody dies during first phase, Hell Week.
So that's in the back of your mind that.
Well, it wasn't necessarily in the back of my mind because I didn't really care. And again, you can say, well, you're just full of crap, Chad, but I was willing to die to make it through this.
After the surgery and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't really care. I just was going to move through it. And I moved through first phase. The hardest thing for me in first phase was the cold water. The most miserable evolution that you can have me personally to do is to lock arms with my teammates and walk out into the surf zone of the Pacific Ocean, which is always cold, always cold. And it's called surf torture. And you lay down in the surf zone, and the waves wash over you, and sand fills every orifice of your body, your ears, your butt crack, all your pockets. It's that fine sand that gets churned up in the surf zone. And so you're laying there, and then at certain intervals, they'll take you out of the water, and they make you swallow this microchip that sits in your gut. And they'll come around, and they have a little scan gun, and they read your core body temperature of that microchip that sits in your gut. And if you're not cold enough, well, then they send the whole class back out into the water. So they've got it down to a science. Like, they've got the torture down to a science. They're using technology to be able to torture, I say torture, develop, strengthen, harden,
Stretch.
weed out the weak. But it is essentially, it's called surf torture. And they're using technology to be able to take you right to the edge of your literal physical capability. So they're taking you down into the mild stages of hypothermia. And then once you're there, then they'll make you do something, run on the beach, log PT, do the O course, whatever. It warms you back up, right? And then they're going to put you right back in that water. So surf torture was the hardest thing for me.
And Hell Week, you literally stay up 7 days, right?
Yeah, Hell Week starts on a Sunday, like a Sunday evening, Sunday night, and it finishes usually like midday Friday.
5 days.
Yeah, about 5 days.
And you're awake and doing physical stuff?
Yeah. Hell Week is pretty brutal for sure. It's interesting though. I just did this 250-mile race, and it was about 4.5 days. And I've been comparing the two, Hell Week and that, and it's interesting to make the comparison. But Hell Week definitely was hard. It's the first time, obviously, I had been awake at about 3 days, I started to hallucinate. I'll never forget. We were out in front of the chow hall on about day 3 of Hell Week, and I'm in the push-up position because by day 3, you're so tired, they can't just let you stand there. If you just stand there and you're still, you'll fall asleep, and guys will actually just fall over on their face, right? So anytime you stop, you're in the push-up position, or you're holding something, or they have to keep you doing something just to keep you awake. But I was in the push-up position, and I looked back up under my right arm, and it looked like the sky was falling on me. I thought the sky was like coming down on me, and I had never hallucinated before. And that started, and I went up to our medic, and I said, "Hey man, something weird is happening to me." And he just looks me back right in the eye, and he says, "Do you want to quit?" Like, he didn't try to console me. He didn't try to explain to me, "Hey, Chad, you've been awake for 3 days. You're hallucinating right now." And so, just working through all those new experiences of figuring out what happens to your body when you stay awake that long. And
did you hallucinate in the 250-mile?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm used to it now. It doesn't freak me out now. So you kind of expect it kind of around that 3-day mark. You're going to start getting real weird, man.
So was the Navy, go ahead.
I think what's cool is they follow them around with that bell so they can tap out
At any time.
So that's always.
They want them to quit, kind of to thin the herd.
Exactly.
It's a voluntary program. Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah.
So does the Navy SEALs begin like you starting to want to do these hard things? Like you have a surgery, you have one goal, and you go and accomplish it. But is that the hardest thing you had done? Obviously the hardest thing up to that point, but is that what inspired you to start doing these hard things? Or was the chaotic that you already aware of the chaos, so you were already trying to do these hard things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I was aware of the fact that I'm the type of person that thrives in chaos back then when I don't think I was self-aware enough to realize that.
Yeah.
I just think I was living that out.
And honestly, man, I don't know, like when I was 19, I don't know any 19-year-olds that are. Like,
no.
That's difficult at that age to be
Self-aware,
to know who you are.
who you
Don't
are.
even know you're
That's
working
right.
with concrete. You're like, I just want to do something else.
Yeah. And for me, like going through the hard things that I went through in SEAL training, that for me, I wasn't getting any satisfaction from doing those hard things, or like I never remember like being proud of myself for getting through Hell Week. I was just moving through these things for the purpose of finishing or achieving the goal.
Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I was just moving through these
There's
things.
another box you had to check to get to your
That's
goal.
all it was.
Yep,
It was just checking these boxes. But it's an amazing training pipeline. It's really it changes everything about you. And some good, some bad. Like I remember one day in SEAL training, never expected this. They bring the whole class into a classroom. They've got a projector the size of that back wall right there set up. And they make us all sit down in the classroom. Instructors are running around. They're all amped up, screaming. And they put on this projector a video that one of these instructors had got off of a target overseas. And the video is of an American over in Iraq or Afghanistan somewhere having his head sawn off with a little knife. And so it's horrific. It's horrific, right? And guys are like turning their head and like puking, and the instructors are like, no, you will watch this. Like they wouldn't let you take your attention off of that. They made you just sit there and watch that over and over and over again. And they're the whole time screaming, you think this is a game? Like you think what you're doing right now is a game? Like, no, this could be you. These are the people that you're going to fight. So things like that, like they're just hardening your mind to, they're turning you into just a complete savage.
Yeah.
You know? So not only through the physical activity, but just through the mental and emotional torture. So some of the things that some of the change you go through is obviously good and serves you well for the remainder of your life, but a lot of it is really hard to rewire. You know, I still have issues today with, just being in relationship with people and just, there's all kinds of weird, and I don't even call it PTSD or anything. It's just the result of the lifestyle that I chose. And there's a lot of guys that are way worse off than me and struggle with a lot more than me. But anybody that goes through this, even just the training, anybody that goes through this is going to see the world a different way.
And that opens up my eyes to the struggle of the suicide and the PTSD that you mentioned, like the trauma that you guys willingly put yourself through. It's probably hard to come back and just live a normal life with all of that. I think it definitely is. I mean, and of course, my faith is the thing that has sustained me through through that transition for sure. My faith and then also my family. And so I've had a lot of things stacked in my favor. I mean, not only have I didn't have to go through. There are guys out here that served in the military that had to go through some really, really horrific things, right? And I mean, I saw some ugly things during my time in the military, but I didn't have to hold one of my teammates while they bled out in my arms or something like that. So there's a lot of guys who have been through horrific things, and then there's another piece to that. That's the conversation. Nobody ever has the conversation. My Sea Daddy, my mentor in the SEAL team. So now we're moving on to graduating SEAL training. Went through BUDS. Then you go through SQT, SEAL qualification training, which is another 6 months. Then you finally get to your SEAL team. When you get to your SEAL team,
you get assigned a mentor, which is a guy that's in your platoon who has been there for a long time. And his job is to work with you as a new guy to make sure you stay alive, basically. Like teach you the things, teach you the ropes, and make sure you stay alive. But his name was Jake Hubman, my mentor. And speaking on that side of PTSD, Jake, my mentor, killed himself in 2012 while he was on active duty.
Real quick, guys, this is Rob with the Wheeling Agency. I just wanted to reach out to y'all. We've been in business a little over 3 years here in Paulding County. We take pride in serving our community, so next time you're in the need for some insurance, give us a call and reach out. Now get back to the show.
So when Jake took his life in 2012, this is a part of the conversation that I think a lot of people don't have, is like a lot of guys and girls, obviously, they end up committing suicide, and it might not necessarily be from some like acute traumatic experience that they had, but what plays into it is when you do this job, especially in special operations, it takes all of you. It takes everything from you. Yeah. And so what ends up happening, this is the sacrifice aspect of being in special operations specifically. People talk about like sacrificing for your country. Well, it's because your whole life is dedicated to this organization, and it has to be, because the op tempo is just so fast. You never stop. You're trying to stay alive. You're doing dangerous crap all the time. And so what ends up happening is everything in your personal life ends up falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, your marriage falls apart, your relationships with people that matter, your family, it all falls apart. And so it creates this really, really toxic lifestyle. And I mean, dang near every dude I knew in special operations was battling with this.
Yeah.
It's just like the dedication to and then ultimately a lot of guys can't handle that. Like they get to the point where their personal life and the things that actually matter are so, they've just crumbled. And so that's what ends up crushing them, right?
Yeah.
And I think even in entrepreneurship and business and stuff, I think you see people that have the same struggle, right? Anything that you just dedicate your entire self to, and especially anything that you identify as or with, like outside of identifying as, for me as a servant of Christ, like I've learned that every organization, every person, everything that is of this world will eventually let you down. It's not, if you identify with this thing or this relationship or with this job, or if you put too much of your identity and yourself into that thing, you're eventually going to get crushed.
Oh yeah.
Because with the military specifically, you're not going to do that job your whole life.
Mm-mm.
And so you have to leave that organization at some point. And when you leave that organization, like no matter how big of a part of that organization you were, you realize when you leave it, nobody freaking cares that you're gone.
Yeah. You're just a number.
Yeah. Nobody cares that you're gone.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the way it is, man. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's a big part of what veterans struggle with. And I just had a guy the other day ask me, well, so he asked me first, he said, Chadd, in your Business 307 project, why don't you have any other military or SEALs working with you? And I said, you want the honest answer? He said, yeah. I said, because most team guys that get out of the teams, they're totally unreliable because their personal life is just a complete freaking wreck.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, I didn't expect to hear that. So that's why other team guys, I've tried to bring other team guys into what we're doing, and they're just so unreliable that you can't depend on them, therefore you can't work with them.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, Chadd, why have you been so successful? And it's because of my faith. I had something else, something that is eternal, something that's never going to change. I had that to put my identity in. And then I also had really good mentors come alongside me when I transitioned out of the military. But a lot of guys don't have faith, one, which is the foundation, should be the foundation of your identity. And then two, they don't have the right people around them when they do transition. And so then they're just left with this shell of a personal life. The organization that they gave everything to no longer cares about them. And then they become what? Hopeless.
Yeah.
They reach the point of despair, which is absolute hopelessness. And then that's when they're gone.
You know, and that's a bad place to be, but I watch everything you do. I consume all of your content, and I just want to thank you for what you do with leading those people to faith, because I think you said you started with faith. I think if more military people who get out of it, if they could find that hope in their faith, I think it would help, the suicide, all of that stuff. So I just appreciate what you do in that, because I know that it truly is sad what's happening to our veterans, every single day. You hear the stats.
Yeah, and even now the place that we live in, I mean, it's everybody. It's not just.
Yeah, you're so right.
It's not just veterans.
Yeah, the world needs it.
It's.
Yeah, you're so right.
So many people are hopeless right now.
Yes.
And I think the whole thing that we've all experienced over the last 2 years, 3 years now, it's like that really, people used to think that there were things that they could put their hope in or depend on. So whether that was for, like me, I'm in the running community, like you could hope for a race. Like you could put your hope in, hey, I can train for this race. I'm going to go. I can look forward to this. It's going to happen. Well, then when all this stuff happened over the last few years, and I won't say the names because I don't want to hurt your YouTube algorithm, but all of a sudden, things that people who don't have faith, the things that they were putting their hope in, the things that were kind of keeping them going, they realized all of a sudden, well, holy crap, all that just went away.
Yep.
Now I've come to the realization that I can't really hope for anything in this life, because now I've experienced a time in my life where, well, heck, all the things I hoped for got taken away, and like, wow, this is reality. Yeah. People got slapped upside the head with reality.
That's right.
Putting your faith in your hope in all of these temporal, worldly things.
Yeah.
And so that's led a lot of people to despair. But the other thing that's done is it's made people now more open to even the idea of the gospel.
Yes.
The hope of the gospel. Yeah. It's easier now for me to go out and share the gospel with people than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
People are more receptive to it.
Yeah. We're seeing that in our church.
Yeah.
We really are.
Yeah. So there's good and bad that has came from it.
Absolutely.
But we're getting way sidetracked.
I
now.
loved it. No, that's good
when
stuff.
You talked about the people getting out of there and then being just a shell of their former person, like I did the Bible study at our office this morning, and I said, the only thing that explains everything is Jesus Christ. That is the only thing. Faith is the only thing that explains everything. And so these shells of human beings that you're talking about, if they were, I don't know what you're provided as on exit, but even if it was just a Bible, even if it was just a word or a video from this mentor or something, that would help them turn to faith. And I'm glad they're more open to hearing it. That makes me really happy that because of the involvement in the last 5 years that it's easier now. That makes me, and we're talking about it on TV and stuff. But I really think that even outside of the military or outside of business, you're a shell of a person, whether you're successful or not, if you don't have faith.
Oh, I see it all the time.
And that's my personal experience, like of who I used to be and stuff like that. But I love what we're saying about faith. And I want to ask you, because we're transitioning now, but you said when you were 19, sitting at the concrete company, there was not much faith there. How did that transition? Was it the military? Yeah, it was an experience that I had. And, coming up as a kid,
we had Bibles in the home. There were periods of our life as children where we went to church regularly. I was exposed to the gospel. I was exposed to those things as a kid, right? But once I came to be an adult, I never took the step to truly understand all of those things that I was exposed to as a kid. I never took the step to really accept Christ personally, with a deep understanding of what that was, right? So as I went through separated from Georgia and went through my military career, all my thoughts about God and Jesus and stuff just continued to kind of degrade and go down the drain. And by the way, there's no way I can cover my military career and what happened. That's a 4-hour conversation. What happened during the 12 years I was in the military?
Yeah.
But the foundation of it is that the whole first portion up to 2012. So from 2007 to 2012, I became increasingly a more wicked and terrible person. Literally, I got to the point that I didn't care about anyone. I didn't know how to love another person. I didn't know how to serve other people. I just turned into this just nasty, just complete savage of a terrible person. And I didn't treat anybody right and made a ton of just terrible mistakes. Got into drinking and partying and just didn't give a crap about nothing, man. And so ultimately, we were overseas, and I was staying in this place that, just to sum it up, this place was inhabited by some kind of demonic force. And so the presence of this thing that was in this place where we were staying, me and a few of my teammates, it was keeping us up at night, and it was really oppressive. And we got so freaked out by the presence of this thing, making noise at night and this all kinds of crazy stuff happening, that we ultimately were all ended up sleeping in the same room together. And we're all SEALs, right? Yeah. And so it was this weird,
tough guys.
It was this weird environment where all of a sudden we had encountered this force that we didn't know how to combat. And so I ended up calling my little brother, who had at that point turned his life over to Christ. And I think by that point he was plugged in with 101 Church and James Cordell and all them. And, Blake's always, if there is a pillar that has really stood strong throughout our family, it's been Blake. I mean, he has just been a pillar for all of us. And so I called him, and he put me in touch with his pastor, and his pastor, I walked around this place. I had no other ideas or options. And so I walked around this place as James Cordell prayed, and over the phone, he's praying around this place, and he has me anoint my door with some olive oil. And then after that, this thing left, and it was just total peace. And so that was when I finally said, okay, Chadd, you're a fool if you don't really try to comprehend what just happened here. And really start to read the Bible with a new perspective, right?
Yeah.
Not just reading the Bible because it's what we all do down here in the South, but read the Bible to actually try to understand the nature of Yahweh, the creator of the universe, Jesus Christ, understand his nature, understand the gospel, and then that's what I did. And then that is where the moment that I decided to really give my life to Christ. And when I did that, I got the whole thing all at once. So when I did that, I wasn't in church. I was just in the same place where I was living overseas. And I just decided to give my life to Christ and accept Him. And I understood for the first time the need for Christ. And how do you understand the need for Christ? By reading Christ's words, and reading especially the Sermon on the Mount, where, you know, Christ lays forth this standard of perfection. And then, you know, you realize, holy crap, I can't do this. I'm screwed. I can't do this. Okay. And then you get to the end of the book of Matthew, and then you start to see, okay, this is why God, Jesus Christ, this is why He died, all right? This is the purpose of His resurrection, giving you victory over death and hell. He died because something had to pay for your wickedness.
That's right.
For God to be perfect, a perfect judge, He couldn't be a perfect judge if He just let us as humans go about doing what, like, He had to pay the price, and He did that for us because He loves us. And then really coming to an understanding of that and giving my life to Christ, and it changed everything. The Holy Spirit, when you give your life to Christ, people don't understand. I understand this in a very real way. Literally, the Spirit of Christ, which is the Holy Spirit. One of the unique things about the God we serve is He's a triune, not the God we serve, Yahweh.
Yes.
The God
The
of the
God.
universe,
Yes.
the God. One of the unique things about Him in comparison to all other religious philosophies is the true God is a triune being, God the Father, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, which is outside the realm of our comprehension. But when you give your life to Christ, then literally the Spirit of Christ, which is the Holy Spirit, literally comes in and possesses you, essentially. I don't want to say possesses you, but comes and lives in you.
Yes.
And so when that happened, what happens is when you have the Spirit of Christ enter your body and He's in you, the Holy Spirit is in you, it changed everything about the way I thought, the way that I perceived the world around me. Like, it changed the way I talked. It changed the way I thought. It changed the way I treated other people. It changed my desires. And it did all that. Like, it did all that all at once. Now, I've been serving Christ since 2012, and obviously, through diligent seeking, I have come to understand more about the nature of Yahweh, and more about and the depth of my understanding and appreciation for the gospel has just continued to increase, right? But I got it all at once, and then so that from that point, that's the first time I think in my life where I was actually able to treat other people well, where I was actually able to desire the right things, where I was able to begin to understand, you know, who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to perceive the world and what my purpose was and all that, right?
That's so good, man. So that was halfway through your military career,
That
roughly?
That was 2012, and then I left the Navy. I was medically retired from the Navy in January 2019.
Wow.
Yep.
Man, that had to be a good thing for you to see as a dad, seeing that life change.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
Which we've all been there. I mean, I've lived for the devil
Amen.
just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, you're going to do one or the other.
Yeah, you're not going to be in between.
That's right.
You think a lot of people go to church and they think, well, we go to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
Well, you're either serving one or the other. You can sit in the pulpit.
That's
or in
exactly
the-
right.
in the congregation, you still live for the devil.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And I've been there.
Same.
Personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not being critical because I've lived it myself.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
what it
you-
can be.
You're going to be a slave to something.
That's exactly
I
right.
think as far as the family, I think, we're stronger. I think our whole family has come full circle. We've all got it now.
I love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
awesome.
So Tell us briefly about the military career. How many did you do? Several deployments? Were you?
Yeah, the first time I deployed was in support of the Secret Service with the President Obama administration. So I worked with the Secret Service a little bit overseas. That was the first one. The second one was they call it a UCOM. It was mainly in the European theater where we were training other, first world NATO countries and stuff like that, doing these big training exercises. And then the third time I deployed was first to Northern Africa. I spent some time up there when the Arab Spring was happening in Benghazi, and they were attacking all the embassies and all that crap. And then I left Northern Africa, and I bounced all around all over the continent of Africa, doing multiple different jobs. Ended up, the very end of that deployment was back with the Secret Service supporting President Obama's vacation. I'll never forget that, riding around with the Secret Service and in a place like Senegal, and they had signs up on the road that said "Welcome home, President Obama," and I just thought that was hilarious because all the birth certificate stuff, And so that was a good deployment. That was and two, during that was the deployment that I got saved. So that was good, and then after that, I actually became a SEAL instructor. And there's a whole story behind that. My wife, I got home from that last deployment. My wife was essentially dying from an addiction to opiates.
Oh my goodness.
And so I could have deployed again, but then she would have just stayed home and overdosed and basically died. So I decided to go to my command and say, "Hey, can you give me a job as an instructor while my wife goes to rehab?" Yeah. So that I can support her. And so they let me become an instructor. And while I was an instructor, I think two things happened. That was where I developed I figured out that I loved teaching people while I was a SEAL instructor. And so they actually taught me how to teach. And then I developed a real passion for teaching people, developing training curriculum and stuff like that. And then the second thing that happened is I think I slowed down enough for the first time in a decade to kind of realize that there were some things a little bit off physically. So those two things kind of happened simultaneously, and ultimately that's what led to the medical retirement. I'm deaf, completely deaf on one side. I have 48% loss of vestibular function on one side, which affects my balance.
Oh, wow.
And all that is from, I was a breacher during my time in the team, so all that's from the concussion from the bombs that a breacher's an explosives expert, basically. And it's just from the repeated concussions, probably thousands. Wow. It affects your brain much the same way as an impact, Yeah. So just kind of all this kind of noticing things that are a little off with my body, that you didn't have time to pay attention to any of that stuff while you were in a platoon because it was just go, 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 So when I started to realize these things, I just went and basically had them checked out, and they send you down a rabbit hole, and they're like, "Hey man, you got this, this, and this wrong with you. If you keep doing this job, you might end up a freaking vegetable." Mm-hmm. And so they're like, you need to go find something else to do. Wow. And
that was in 2019.
That was in 2019. Yep.
Man, and then so 2019. Now we talked about it earlier. Now you're kind of that shell of a person in a little bit, but luckily you have faith. Where did you go in 2019? Did you immediately go into the entrepreneur world that we know today, or did you take some time there?
No. Well, two things happened. I started ultra running in 2019. Wow. So that was the first time I got into ultra running. And so what that did, the reason why that's so key in my life is I see a lot of people that are struggling with finding the right people to do life with. Like they're struggling to find mentors. They're struggling to find people to surround themselves with who want, that's if you're a driven person. If you want to, if you have all these big goals and whether it's financial goals, business goals, spiritual goals, whatever it is, if you have big goals, it's hard to find the right people, and you can't do it alone.
Oh, no.
Like you're not going to reach your goals by yourself.
No.
And
full potential.
yeah, and a lot of people decide that they're just going to try to do it alone, and they end up failing. But ultra running, what that did for me is it put me in an environment with other driven people, and it helped develop many of the relationships that now serve me today in business. So I started ultra running, and for work, I didn't know what I was going to do for work. So I went and worked for a contracting company that was formerly called Blackwater, and they're stationed right there in North Carolina. So they were about an hour from me. So I worked for them for a little while. They pay really good money. I had my military retirement, so that was coming in, and I was running and doing that. And that is essentially when I met Jesse.
Oh, cool.
Jesse Itzler was kind of around that time frame. And the reason I met him is because I was doing this ultra running, and I found out I was pretty good at it. And one of my friends who I had actually been in the SEAL teams with said, "Hey man, you need to make an Instagram page." And I didn't even know what Instagram was. I thought it was so stupid, man. But he just kept harping on it. So I created one, and I would, make some absolutely terrible posts about ultra running or whatever. But
like, man, my feet hurt.
Yeah. So through our family, Jesse had a mutual contact through our family and he heard that I was ultra running, and he was going to do a race too. So here we go. We're talking about the reason that we met was through this activity of ultra running, because I had chosen to go and inject myself into this environment where, that naturally draws people that are like me. We met, and he was a big influential part of my transition from the military, because when I first met up with him to train him, just coach him basically, he started telling me all this stuff about like what a brand was, and I coached Jesse for one day. He invited me out to his house, and he's like, "Man, I have a race coming up, but I can't seem to run further than like 25 miles. He was like, "Every time I go out and try to run more than 25 miles, I just hit this wall where I can't go any further." And so I just spent a day with him, and the day that I spent with him, we ran over 50 miles. And so I was just giving him these little tips, like mindset tips, like nothing to do with his running form, but like the way you're thinking, like where are you letting your mind go? What are you talking about? What are you thinking about? And just honing all that stuff in. Now, I thought this was all common knowledge. I thought everybody thought like me. My mindset was developed over time and doing hard things during my career in the military. So everybody that I was surrounded with in the military thought the same way that I thought in terms of this type of stuff. And so when I started kind of helping him make these little tweaks, and he saw himself go from 25 miles to 50 miles in one day and still felt good, like he could go further, he was like, "Dude, you need to start sharing this stuff with people." And so then he's explaining to me what a brand is. He's really connected. So he said, "I can, if you want to go and share these principles that you just taught me with the world, I can set some things up for you, and everything will change." And so me and Jesse hopped on his private jet and flew out to Southern California and did some interviews with some really influential people who have really big platforms. And I just shared the same basic things that I shared with him that I thought well, everybody knows this stuff, but then I realized not everybody knows this stuff.
Yeah.
And then everything just took off from there.
Man, that's awesome. So that kind of gets you into, now you started your 3 of 7, you're doing that. Saw yesterday you've got this cool knife that's coming out. Like,
Yeah.
you're doing so many cool things.
Yeah.
And you're really pouring into so many people. I've got to ask you too, because I had this question before you even brought this up, because I'm very interested, like you said, of getting around the people who think like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ultra stuff that you do, I've studied it and I've watched it from a distance, and those people are just very driven, and we're very driven. So I think that's something that I eventually want to get into. What is it that, and you I know obviously there's a lot of information on it that you've put out there, but tell our audience a little bit of what are you telling yourself mentally when you're running 250 miles? Like, how do you push through that? Because for me, I ran a mile in the gym this morning. After a mile, I was like, good grief, I'm gassed. I don't know how I could go anymore. So what is it quickly? I know we could probably talk about this for hours, but like, what are you telling yourself in those moments when you're running 250 miles?
So the foundation of my mindset when I'm doing hard things, really hard things, is very simple. And it's so simple, I think, that people, well, it's so simple that it's hard to sell to people. You know, it is, I'm telling myself to be patient. It's probably the most foundational element of what allows me to run 250 miles is I have to be patient, because anything that's worth having, it's going to take a long, long time to get it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be patient, and patience is also one of the elements of our mindset that is the most under attack. The way that our world is designed now, we don't have to be patient anymore. We can have everything that we want to know, that we want to have. If you've got the money and the resources to have it, you can have it whenever you want it. So people have lost the art of being patient, but I have developed patience. And here's the thing. Here's why I can't sell. Here's why this is hard to sell to people. Because when I sit here and tell you anything that's worth having in life is going to take you a long, long time to get it. And you guys, dude, you're doing all these houses right now. Mm-hmm. That's a year-long process. It's going to take you a year or more to reap any reward from the work that you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. Right? And guess what? That freaking sucks. Mm-hmm. You know, you're making a big investment up front, and now you got to be the one that you have to wait this year plus to get any return on that. And most people, the reason most people won't do what you're doing, the reason most people won't do what I'm doing, is they're not patient enough for that to happen. They settle for less because they're not patient enough to reap big rewards, you know, in the long term. How do you become more patient? Yeah. You force yourself into environments that make you be patient. That's what me running this 250-mile race was all about. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with running. Like, it forced me into an environment where I had to learn to be ultra patient, because I was going to have to run for 4.5 days in the midst of eventually extreme pain and fatigue. And it forced me to be patient and allow this thing to unfold step by step to eventually achieve the goal that I had set out to achieve, which was crossing the finish line. So the only way to become more patient is through training. Training is seeking out some sort of something that's going to force you. There's no other option. You either be patient, you go through the entire process, be patient with the process, be patient with yourself, be patient with your team, all aspects of everything that's making the progress happen. You force yourself into an environment that you have to do that, or you don't make it. And so when you do that over and over again, you start to learn the importance of patience. You start to learn how things work. Okay, anything worth having actually takes a long time. This is what this course we just ran, the rite of passage is 24 hours. I take a small team out, 24 hours on their feet, moving through the North Georgia mountains, 24 hours straight. When you first start, it's real easy. But as it goes, it gets harder and harder, and you get tireder and tireder. And 24 hours becomes this long, long time, right? And they have to be patient if they're going to get to that 24-hour mark and actually make it through this thing. So all of my training is designed around teaching people to become more patient in the midst of adversity, in the midst of pain, in the midst of frustration, in the midst of all those things, and then eventually achieving the goal that they set out to achieve. So that takes repetition. The second thing is I force myself to stay present. The number one reason that people quit anything in life is because they overextend themselves mentally. They are doing something, again, if it's worth doing, it's going to be a long-term project. And somewhere in the midst of that long-term project, look at SEAL training, for instance, is a year-long straight training. Somewhere in the midst of that year, you say, holy crap, this is really hard. I'm only 4 months into this thing. There's no way I can do this for another year and a half. Mm-hmm. And then that's the moment that they quit, right? They are no longer present and engaged in the task that they need to be doing in order to simply stay in the fight. Whether that's, restoring houses and real estate, restoring a vehicle. I don't care what it is in life. I think even a marriage, SEAL training, it's the number one reason that people quit. So again, how do you become more present? You have to force yourself into situations that are so freaking hard, and physical. That's the, if you can make something in training physically hard and painful for someone, that's the best environment to then have to force them to stay present, right? So I'm really, really good at not looking too far ahead. Like, I'm good at setting big goals for myself, but then just taking things day by day as they come.
Such a good lesson.
Yeah. Now, I'm also blessed with having people in my life who can look a little ahead. They have the capacity to do that, right? I'm like this pit bull. I'm just focused on what's right in front of me, and I'm just attacking that thing with this just sheer, intensity. And I have people like Blake in my life that he can kind of look at the next 2 or 3 steps, so that allows me to be ultra patient or ultra present, and put my full energy into whatever the task at hand is for me. That might be a rite of passage course. That might be a speaking engagement. That might be a podcast that I'm doing. So that's super important, not to overextend yourself, because you will quit.
Oh, yeah.
And then the last kind of foundational element is being deliberate, and being deliberate with like your relationships, the people that you're surrounding yourself with. I've cut so many people out of my life, dude. Like, there's 3 people outside of my immediate family. There might be 3 people that I'll take phone calls from. Wow. Like, I'm ultra deliberate of who I let into my life. Mm-hmm. I believe there's something to that old saying, like, you're the sum total of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I believe there's something to that. So I'm deliberate about that. Relationships. I'm deliberate about my speech, like the things that I'm talking about, the conversations I'm engaging in. You notice I don't cuss. That's because I'm hyper deliberate of the things that I'm saying. And I slip sometimes. We all do. None of us are going to be perfect at this. We're always striving to become more perfect at these things.
Absolutely.
So I'm deliberate even too with my actions, because in ultra running and stuff, or with any goal, if you get lazy or you get complacent and you take one wrong step, like, you're going to roll your ankle and you can be a mile from the finish line, and you're over, you're done, man. And it's the same, I think, with business. You can become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
I actually can tell you a story to tell you how I'm not perfect. Like this year, in business particular, we had made enough money in January that we didn't have to work the rest of the year. Me and everybody that depends on 3 to 7 project. And so I was in a place this year where I was like, I want to do some things for me, because I haven't done that over the last couple years. I've been so invested in business, and my team, they were coming up with all these new ideas and kind of pushing me to do this and put more things on the schedule. And I said, guys, we've made enough money that we don't have to do anything else the rest of the year. And that's the wrong freaking attitude to have. Like, you will find yourself broke. Like, eventually, if you stop pushing, like, yeah, there has to be some balance. But that was a moment that I wasn't very deliberate with the way that I was thinking, and so that was something I had to check myself with. Like, that's the wrong thing to be portraying to your team, you know?
Yeah. And that's such a good lesson. All 3 of those, man, that just helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Those 3 lessons.
Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for all the value you've provided. I just want to ask you one more question for myself. It's something we ask pretty much everyone that comes on here. And you provided so much value, so I don't know if you can select just one thing. But we named the show Pave the Way because we want to take us and our guests and pave the way for the people of the future, the people that maybe want to do ultra running, the people that want to join the military, the people that maybe haven't stepped out in the faith just the way your story explained. So we always ask, what is one thing that you would give to a future, someone who's trying to pave their way, to the younger generation or to someone who hasn't got the experience level yet? What's one piece of advice you would give them to help them improve?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, I guess, if you could boil it all down, that has ultimately led me to the man that I am today, is that I just haven't quit. Like, I just haven't quit. There are so many, if I had time to tell you my whole story, there are so many things in my life that I should be ashamed of, that there are so many things in my life that should have made me quit. There are so many things in my life that, I shouldn't be here talking to you guys the way I'm talking to you if I wasn't able to move past all those mistakes and all those shortfalls, and if I wasn't able to move past those things, I wouldn't be where I am today. I have chosen to keep going. And so there are my story is unique, and I'll tell it one day when there's time to tell it. But there are a lot of people that have the same story as me in terms of struggle and failure and shortfalls, but you never hear those stories because those people have chosen to not move past the failures, the shame, the shortfalls. They've chosen not to move past those things, and then they've chosen just to kind of disappear, right? Mm-hmm. All the stories that we hear from guys that were in special operations or in the military these days are all stories of heroism and these epic battles and all this stuff. And you don't hear very many, if any, guys telling real stories. Like stories so this is, when you don't quit, this is what it looks like. So a lot of situations in life, you walk through a pile of crap. All right. And sometimes guys will walk through a pile of crap and they come out the other end of it and they're like, that was epic. right? There are those are those stories of being the hero, right? You walk through a pile of crap, but you come out the other end and you're like, that was freaking epic, man. And nobody cares that you have a bunch of crap on you, right? And so those are the stories that we generally hear. I have a lot of stories where I walked through a pile of freaking crap and I came out the other end and everybody was looking at me saying, dude, you're covered in crap. You're a freaking turd. And I said, yeah, I'm covered in crap, but guess what? I'm going to keep on walking, right? Until I'm able to wash this stuff off of me and get started again.
Yes.
So that's what not quitting is, right? And so many people get covered in the crap and they decide, I don't want anybody to see me with this crap smeared all over me. So I'm just going to disappear. Dude, I get attacked on social media all the time. People talk so much crap about me, dude. And you know what I say? Yeah, man, you're right. I've been through a lot of crap, son.
Yeah. I'm just going to keep on going.
Yeah, but I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. That's such a good
And
lesson.
so that's like the only reason that I'm here, man.
Quit.
Yeah.
I love that, man. Well, thank you so much. I literally could never thank you enough. You've changed my life in this conversation. Just made me think so much differently already, and I'm so happy for our audience to hear this. So, man, I just really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for
From
having me,
the bottom of
guys.
my heart.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, dude.
Yep, enough said.